Morning, morning, morning. Ugh. No, it ain't no auto start. It's me. Good afternoon. I got the first pot of coffee brewing. Perking. Yes, perking. Uh, y'all all right? I can't get started. I ain't talking about that old swing song. Y'all remember that? I've flown around the do me do me. I've flown around the world in a plane, settled revolutions in Spain. North Pole I've charted, still I can't get started with you. A lot of people did. I remember Bunny Berrigan's version. Not when it was new. No worries. Everything's a worry with me. Well, that's fine. Oh, I'll be getting up to get my first cup here in a minute. I want to sing one that's only in the good old songs. Now, where is it? Where's my good old songs? I thought about recording an album of a cappella hymns just to kind of supplement the other ones I've done. I sent several people some of the test ones that I did. And this is one of them. Most of them had never heard it. 613 in the good old songs. And I don't believe it's in any other one. I believe I looked it up yesterday. Hail the day so long expected. Hail the year of full release. Zion's walls are now erected and her watchmen publish peace. Through our Shiloh's wide dominion, hear the trumpet loudly roar. Babylon is fallen, is fallen, is fallen. Babylon is fallen to rise no more. All her merchants stand with wonder. What is this that comes to pass? Murmuring like the distant thunder, crying, oh, alas, alas. Swell the sound, ye kings and nobles, priests and people rich and poor. Babylon is fallen, is fallen, is fallen. Babylon is fallen to rise no more. Blow the trumpet in Mount Zion, Christ shall come the second time, ruling with a rod of iron all who now as foes combined. Babel's garments we've rejected, and our fellowship is o'er. Babylon is fallen, is fallen, is fallen. Babylon is fallen to rise no more. This is an old minor key tune from the sacred harp called Babylon is Fallen. I've never heard it sung to any other words. Hail the day so long expected, hail the year of full release. Zion's walls are now erected, and her watchmen publish peace. Through our Shiloh's wide dominion, hear the trumpet loudly roar. Babylon is fallen, is fallen, is fallen. Babylon is fallen to rise no more. All her merchants stand with wonder. to pass, murmuring like the distant thunder, crying, oh, alas, alas. Swell the sound, ye kings and nobles, priests and people, rich and poor. Babylon is fallen, is fallen, is fallen. Babylon is fallen, to rise no more. Blow the trumpet in Mount Zion, Christ shall come the second time, ruling with a rod of iron all who now as foes combine. Babel's garments we've rejected, and our fellowship is o'er. Babylon is fallen, is fallen, is fallen. Babylon is fallen, to rise no more. That's one you don't hear sung every day. And even among the conditionalists that use that book, they don't sing that one too often for some reason. I don't know why. There's nothing in there that smacks of absolute predestination or anything else they hate, maybe. Yeah, but it's because they're still in Babylon. Yes, I believe you may be right. They still have a desire for it anyway. Even old Casey. Now, he's the daddy of conditionalism in most places. Well, no, in a lot of places. Tennessee, they called it the Casey Doctrine, morning. Of course, Lee Hanks was his mentor on that. And Lee took it down to Georgia. Casey took it to California. You know, all these things. Casey put this hymn book together. And I'm thinking, when I was talking there about nothing in that hymn that they ought to disagree with, really. Well, I got thinking about one that's in the old school hymnal. And this is, they've even got one more modern than this now, but this was the one. 27 in the old school. 3 verses. Broad is the Watts hymn. Broad is the road that leads to death. They sing it to Wyndham. Good old minor key tune. They left out a verse. The Watts wrote 4 verses. Well, Brother Cliff, I didn't see you. Brother Eric, I think I said howdy to you. Broad is the road that leads to death, and thousands walk together there. But wisdom shows a narrow path, with here and there a traveler. Deny thyself, take up thy cross, is the Redeemer's great command. Nature must count her gold but dross if she would gain the heavenly land. Now here's the verse they leave out. Casey included it. even though it was contrary to his doctrine. The fearful soul that tires and faints, and walks the way of God no more, is but esteemed almost a saint, and makes his own destruction sure. I'm sure Casey would have told you that's timely destruction, not eternal destruction. Lord, let not all my hopes be vain. Create my heart entirely new, which hypocrites could ne'er attain, which false apostates never knew. Man, I want to sing that too. That's another old minor key tune. Broad is the road that leads to death, and thousands walk together there, but wisdom shows a narrow path, with here and there a traveler. Deny thyself and take thy cross, is the Redeemer's great command. Nature must count her gold but dross, if she would gain this heavenly land. Lord, know the fearful soul that tires and faints, and walks the way of God no more, is but esteemed almost a saint, and makes his own destruction sure. Lord, let not all my hopes be vain. Create my heart entirely new, which hypocrite could ne'er attain, which false apostates never knew. Yeah, there's all sorts of views of the latter end of particularly the reprobate. Will there be eternal conscious torment? Will it be a buried fire? Will it be annihilation? Hell restorationism. Will they stay in there for a while and then God will send them out? Put them up in heaven with everybody else. It's really just a purgatory. I don't know. I have to think by the general tenor of Scripture that the smoke of their torment ascended forever and ever, so I have to agree. I have to just take that and go on with it. All right. Let's get started here after I get my coffee. Be right back. Oh. coffee. Wonderful stuff. Staff of life. I used to say coffee, tobacco, and Tabasco sauce was the real staff of life. Seems like they remain as made. It's 2211. Yeah, that's true. It do, don't it? All right. This is the book that was an eye-opener to me. Received as a gift from W.M. Smoot, March 1936, W.J. Berry. Presented to Brother Robert Lackey, June 28, 1981, by W.J. Berry Sr. in the faith of God's elect. Elder Berry's man that started the Primitive Baptist Library down in Elon, North Carolina. Actually started as the Sovereign Grace Library in California before he moved to North Carolina. Indeed, Elder Smoot sent him this book when he was in North Carolina. When he was in California before he moved. He showed me the book, asked me if I'd ever heard of it. I said no, and I read in it some. And I got up a lot earlier the next day than Brother or Sister Berry, either one. And I was sitting there in his little office. About half the size of this. Bookshelves everywhere. The whole thing was bookshelves and a little desk. I could have read a lot of things that were there, but I pulled this out and was reading it again and again. I read the whole thing in a 2-day visit with him. And when he saw how taken I was with it, he gave me his copy. Elder Smoot would bind them when somebody ordered one. And this is hand-bound by Elder Smoot. It was copyrighted 1929, called The Contest of 1886-1889, Eternal Vital Unity. Election in Christ, the Spiritual Birth. He quotes 3 scriptures. Call to remembrance the former days, Hebrews 10:32. Hath God essayed to go and take him a nation from the midst of another nation by temptations, by signs, by wonders, and by wars, and by an outstretched arm? Deuteronomy 4:34. If the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? Psalm 11:3. Printed and bound at the office of the Secretariat, Occoquan, Virginia. 1923, 1924. This is Elder Smoot's testimony of what happened that caused the division between him as pastor of 3 churches in the Virginia Correspondent Meeting. Hot. Um, Where do I start? I know where I want to start. But I can't find it. I think I am really way too far in the book. I am. What in the world? Brother Gabriel, did the Facebook side just go off? It did, didn't it? Give me just a second, brethren. Now Firefox is acting crazy. Excuse me. Don't don't mean to be rude here. I need to restart this on the Facebook side, page 48. All right. Let's get back to page 28 here, where I think I want to start. In 1874, the Juniata Association of Pennsylvania, having been delivered from a disorderly faction of Clark Baptist, applied for and obtained correspondence with the Virginia Corresponding Meeting, where my membership was at the time. Among the churches dropped from the Juniata Association was the Sidling Hill Church. A few miles from the meeting house of this Sidling Hill Church, the Orderly Baptist erected a meeting house and organized the Fairview Church. Shortly afterwards, individuals, it was supposed instituted by Sidling Hill and its disorderly associates, broke open the doors of the Fairview meeting house in order to hold service there upon the claim that some of their members and friends had contributed to build Fairview meeting house. Also, some 6 or 7 members had left Sidling Hill because of the disorder there and joined Fairview, having of course been excluded from Sidling Hill. In my lifetime, among the Baptists, the churches in New York State called a man as minister, and the churches then were The churches then were New York City, Warwick, Middletown, and Wallkill. And there was another church, Olive and Hurley, that did not call this man. The man had been excluded from a church in North Carolina because of immorality, a charge which he would not answer, yea or nay. He would neither affirm nor deny the charge, and they excluded him. Churches in New York State, the Middletown and Wallkill and New York and Warwick, called him. Anyway, he accepted the call. Olive and Hurley stood opposed. They had a deacon, Edward K. Adsit. That deacon was really close to Brother Barry. Used to see things from his pen in the Old Faith Contender every now and then. Church in New York City had a deacon, Victor Borscht, lawyer by trade, patent attorney. It seems that churches in New York, church at New York City, told the church at Olive and Hurley they were going to accept this man as their minister, as a minister. He said no. They said no, we're not. Now the last, at least I believe the local preacher up there was Elder Arnold Bellis. He was also a good friend of Brother Barry, and his widow was living with the Barrys. Sister Bellis was living there with Brother and Sister Barry. She had been spending her winters there in North Carolina with them, some of the winter at least, and then she'd go back to New York in the summer. Well, she fell, she broke something. I don't know whether it was a leg or a hip. And Brother Barry just built a little apartment in the garage, and she stayed there. So there was a closeness between Brother Barry and the New York churches, particularly the churches of the old Lexington-Roxbury Association, where Elder Bellis ministered. Not just Elder Bellis, but others. Slauson, Rushton. Can't think of the other one that was up there in that time. He would go to their associations. Those folks would come down as well. My Brother Ads had said, no, we don't accept him. He's been excluded by, and for not just some little minor offense. Brother Ads had forwarded the message on to Brother Barry, who told me about it. Vic DeVos told him, we're going to hold a meeting at Olive and Hurley Meeting House. This man's going to preach. We don't care if we have to break the door down. So the spirit of breaking the doors down of a meeting house, of which you weren't a member of the church that meets there, didn't die with people at Sideland Hill. I said, well, Brother Barry, what advice did you give Brother Adsit? He said, just unlock it and go back home and let them have their meeting, but don't participate. I said, well, you're more gracious than I am. He said, why is that? I just said, old man, bring your axe, because you're going to have to break it down and me with it. You know, I felt that strongly. That's exactly what I would do. I think y'all would too, most of you. That meeting house still stands. Olive and Hurley. It's at Ashokan. And y'all remember Ken Burns' great films, The Civil War. That piece that was played by Jay Unger all through it. Do 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 do. That's Ashokan Farewell. Jay Unger wrote it, the man that played it. It ain't some old fiddle tune. But it's beautiful nonetheless. But I say that there's also Ashokan Reservoir that's there. It's in the Catskills. Which some of y'all, if you ever go there, might say, well, be like me and say, well, where's the mountains? I thought we ought to be in the mountains by now. You are in the mountains. Anyway. In October, let's move on. I love playing the Ashokan Farewell. I got to admit it. That's just been First time I ever heard that, I just almost wept. In October 1887, at the session of the Juniata Association, Sidling Hill Church applied for membership. In her membership at the time were 3 members who had been baptized while she was among the Clark Baptists. The messengers of the Tygarts Valley River Association, with which the Juniata was also in correspondence, opposed the admission of the Sidling Hill Church, rightly holding that these 3 members should be properly baptized or that the church should come without them. By the way, there was a church right outside of town here that was in the Tygarts Valley River Association. It's a West Virginia association. It stretched from Elkins up through Philippi up here to Fairmont, down the Tygarts Valley River. One church left, Leading Creek at Montrose, out of Elkins. The matter was laid over until the next session, when Sidling Hill was received, its disorderly baptism thus being recognized, presenting the spectacle not only of endorsing this baptism, but also receiving a church who had excluded 6 or more members, and another church in the same association having received said excluded members, considering them in order in leaving, neither church having taken any steps to set this matter right, thus endorsing a principle that would disrupt all orderly church travel. To me, that's a big problem as the baptisms. You got a church over here, got 6, 7 members in it, been excluded from the one that's applied for membership. Something ain't right. Oh, excuse me. At the session of the Juniata Association in 1887, Elder E.V. White, remember when we talked about the association, the Juniata Association in Sidling Hill Church last week, had the Correll side and the White side. Well, this is the White, Colonel E.V. White, Elder E.V. White. Yes, he was a colonel in the Confederate Army. Elder E.V. White, a messenger of the corresponding meeting of Virginia, and others with him, vehemently urged the reception of the Sidling Hill Church, and in 1888 they were again present, backed by the disorderly party in the Virginia corresponding meeting. And I might say entirely through the efforts of this party, the Juniata Association became involved in this disorder. In company with the late Elder H. Zinn, Harrison Zinn of Tunnelton, West Virginia, in a couple of counties over here. I was present at the Juniata Association when this disorderly act was consummated, arguing against it. Elder Zinn and myself on one side, White and the others in opposition. And there we had a fair sample of the spirit animating this class of Baptists, East and West, which was shown a year later, August 1889, at Quantico, by the Virginia corresponding meeting, in riding roughshod over all arguments, order, or doctrine in order to carry out their intentions. Harrison Zinn, don't know much about him. Don't even think Zinn's his real last name. Think he was adopted. Not as an infant, but as a young man. What's interesting is I worked in the county where he lived, and I thought, well, when did I realized he died early, young? So I looked up his death certificate. Sure enough, it was there. How did he die? Poisoning. I found in one issue of the local paper, which would be the Kingwood paper. I'm trying to think when he died. It was in the early 1900s. I can find out. He's on Find a Grave. He says, this one, that one, gave about 6 names. returned from Tunnelton after having attended the funeral of the late Reverend Harrison Zen. I think they called him Reverend, didn't they? They might have just called him Harrison Zen, who died unexpectedly. He was poisoned. I guess it was unexpected. But I find nothing of any kind of investigation. Makes me wonder if it was blood poisoning. And not what we think. Alright, so now what's going to happen? The Virginia correspondent meeting met with the Church of Quantico Wednesday, August 14th, 1889. Silas H. Durand represented the Delaware River, though the association at their session in May previously had not appointed him. William L. Beebe was present as a messenger from Delaware and Warwick. That's Gilbert's son. Also a colonel. Raised a company of cavalry, Confederate Army in Georgia, where he was living at the time. F.A. Chick and Milton Dance were messengers from the Baltimore Association. Hence we had representing the disorderly Baptists of the East as preachers Durand Chick, Beebe, Francis, and Badger, the last two members of the corresponding meeting. The A.B. Francis later would go to serve churches in lower Delaware. Aaron Bice Francis, if I remember right. Somewhere his youngest son was still alive and lived in Salisbury and gave me a copy of a writing of his father about his experience and his experiences during the war. Don't think he ever rose above the rank of private. His family were not slaveholders. He was fighting for principle, as were most in the Confederate Army. Badger, if I remember right, was from Maine and went down to Virginia to serve a couple of churches in the corresponding meeting. The Occoquan and Quantico churches had been fully advised of the situation, and we trust by the grace of God prepared to meet the coming storm. At the session of the corresponding meeting held at New Valley the year previous, August 1888, an effort had been made to force upon us their view of election and the birth in the circular that year. A public attack was made from the stand upon our views, although up to this time the churches of this meeting had claimed to hold the sentiments that they now proceed to discard. In the year from 1888 up to the session of 1889, misrepresentations, falsehoods, and downright lies were circulated against us, and it became clear that we were hopelessly separated from those who were determined to force us to accept their views, or as previously stated, drive us from their ranks, and we considered that it was useless to prolong the contest. The Occoquan Church, in their letter to the corresponding meeting, called attention to the disorders in the Juniata Association, requesting the corresponding meeting to drop that association from her correspondence, as Juniata had been labored with in vain. Also that the Eastern Associations had opened correspondence with the disorderly element in the Mount Pleasant Association, and requested that their attention should be called to the matter. The letter of the Occoquan Church was written in a courteous and brotherly manner. There was nothing in it calculated to give offense to orderly Baptists. Yeah, this is going to sound really familiar. It should be borne in mind that at this session of the corresponding meeting, the disorderly party had a majority of messengers. Therefore, they could outvote us. The letter from the Occoquan church was read from the stand with the letters from the other churches. Our brethren who were present remember the uncalled for and disorderly attack made upon that letter from the stand the evening after it was read by a minister who came among us uninvited and undesired by our churches, but who was imposed upon us by the majority party in the Virginia corresponding meeting as a messenger from Eastern associations. Our brethren also remember the remarkable discussion, if we may call it a discussion, the following morning, Thursday, August 15th, in the corresponding meeting upon the motion to drop the correspondence with the Juniata Association. At the proper time, in the order of business, in Thursday morning's session, and in obedience to the instruction of the church of their membership, the messengers from the Occoquan church moved that the correspondence with the Juniata Association be dropped. All right. We're going to put this on pause while I refill my coffee cup. Okay? Hang on now. The good part's right around the corner. Oh, here we go. Oh, man, that's hot. All right. Then followed a remarkable scene. Instead of properly and fairly discussing the motion made by authority of one of the churches of her membership, an attempt was made by the majority party to implicate the brother who made the motion in some inconsistency as though he were under trial. We repeatedly urged them to discuss the matter, declaring our ability then and there to prove the statements made in our letter. They, as continuously, fought against the discussion, attempting to force upon us in its stead a personal wrangle. In the midst of the excitement, and while our motion was still before the meeting, never having been either considered or voted upon, another motion was made by one of the majority party as follows. Quote, resolved, that this association does not consider it in her province to interfere in the internal affairs of corresponding associations, close quote. The move of this resolution probably should be the mover of this resolution was pleased to term it as an amendment to the original motion, and we were informed that it could be considered and voted upon instead of our motion, we suppose under general parliamentary law. Of course, it was no use for us to inform the Virginia Corresponding Meeting that we were not under general parliamentary law, but in this particular, we were governed by the fair old school Baptist regulations so uniformly observed in orderly old school Baptist churches that every motion, properly seconded, shall be considered and voted upon, unless withdrawn by the brother who made it, and that a second motion cannot be entertained while the first is under consideration. The motion which we made was not voted upon, not even fairly discussed. When we saw that the design was to substitute this so-called amendment for our motion, we informed the majority party that the adoption of that amendment would be considered by our people as an endorsement on the part of those who voted for it of the disorders of the Juniata Association. Believing it could be easily shown that this amendment was not in order and did not apply at all to the case under consideration, we arose to discuss it, but were informed that discussion was not in order, that one of the objects of the amendment was to shut off discussion. With a total disregard for order and the feelings of the minority party, with no opportunity whatever to fairly discuss it, this so-called amendment was rushed through the Virginia Corresponding Meeting by a majority vote, and our two churches were given to understand that, if we were not satisfied, we could withdraw from the corresponding meeting. This last information, however, was unnecessary, as, thanks be unto the God of heaven, the keys of our churches were not in their hands, and we were not dependent on them to know what gospel order required of us at the proper time. But let us glance a moment at this amendment to our motion. Resolved, that the association does not consider it in her province to interfere in the internal affairs of corresponding associations. We ask the candid reader, had we requested the corresponding meeting to interfere in the internal affairs of the Juniata Association? We came to the corresponding meeting charging the Juniata Association with disorder, which charge we were ready and abundantly able to sustain, had we been given the opportunity. Has one association the right to drop another for disorder? All orderly Baptists will answer promptly, yes. This was the case at issue. The Occoquan Church is expected, from the general disregard of either our views or feelings by these people, that they would pay no attention to our request. Hence it had been decided, when we adopted the letter, that, if this course was pursued, our churches were instructed to withdraw from the association, notifying them that the church had so ordered. The letter from the Occoquan Church was read as stated with the letters from the other churches on Wednesday, August 14, 1889. Thursday, August 15th. In obedience to their instructions, the messengers of that church moved to drop correspondence with the Juniata Association. Upon the refusal of the corresponding meeting to pay any attention whatever to our request, it was evident that the time had arrived for our withdrawal, but we concluded to wait until Friday morning in order to give the Quantico Church opportunity to consider the situation. The Occoquan Church had previously stated, had instructed her messengers to withdraw from the corresponding meeting in case our request was refused, but we desired to give Quantico an opportunity to act with us if they so desired. As moderator of the association, I had an influence in the appointment of preachers to fill the stand, and as the majority party had shown their desire for weak things, I concluded to arrange to have the stand filled that Thursday p.m. with the weakest preacher we had, F.A. Chick. While he was preaching, we arranged to call a special meeting of the Quantico Church to consider the situation, and sent a messenger to all the members present on the ground to gather at the meeting house, which resulted in a full attendance of the membership with the exception of two male members, J.W. Chapman and L.A. Lynn, who had decided to go off with the other party. The matter was fully and thoroughly discussed at this church meeting, and upon motion, the church decided to withdraw with the Occoquan church from the corresponding meeting. The act of the church was unanimous on the part of all present, with one exception, J.M. Barbee, Sr., who stated that while his mind was not clear on the move in this matter yet, he would not oppose the church in her action. It's a brotherly thing to do, in my opinion. And to his credit, be it said that after seeing more of the course of the order and doctrine of our opponents, he became fully satisfied with our position, and many pleasant visits our members have enjoyed with him at his hospitable home as in former years. I met his son, J.M. Barbee, Jr. He was a retired judge of Prince William County, I believe. State judge, anyway. Nice old man. Didn't have much to say about Elder Smoot, but he's still a nice old man. I enjoyed talking to him. Friday morning, August 16th, Elder Smoot, in obedience to the instructions of the Occoquan and Quantico churches, and in behalf of the messengers of those churches, informed the Virginia corresponding meeting of our withdrawal from said corresponding meeting because of its disorder. Then followed a remarkable scene of confusion and disorder for which this class of Baptists have become so famous. Anyone at all acquainted with Old School Baptist or Gospel Order, and especially with the organization and character of the Virginia corresponding meeting, well knows that our churches had an unquestioned right to withdraw from the corresponding meeting at any time they choose to do so. All that was necessary on the part of the corresponding meeting was simply to record in their minutes this act of withdrawal. Instead of this, our brethren who were present remember the excitement, the wild, reckless assertions of some of the ministers of that body and its correspondents from the stand, the personal abuse hurled at our ministry and churches. It was a kind of go-as-you-please harangue. No attempt was made to confine it to any kind of order. Each speaker seemed disposed to say what he chose without regard to any particular subject, and the whole proceedings wound up with a declaration on the part of the messengers of the Virginia corresponding meeting that when Occoquan and Quantico churches excluded members, their churches would receive them. The order of the corresponding meeting required the pastor or preacher serving the church where the meeting was held to be its moderator without any vote on the part of the messengers. Hence, as serving the Quantico church, I was moderator of the association. When the discussion took place Thursday morning, I called J.F. Newland, one of the messengers from the Ebenezer church, to act as moderator in my place while I took part in the discussion. J.F. Newland represented the majority party in the association, but was a calm, conservative man, and as the majority party could by their votes control the action of the meeting, it did not matter so much in regard to the position of moderator. Now here's what's going to just blow your minds. At least it did mine. Upon the withdrawal of our churches Friday morning, my service as moderator was closed, as I was one of the messengers withdrawing, and the majority party elected J.N. Badger to serve the few remaining hours as moderator. The messengers from the two withdrawing churches promptly met and arranged for a council to be held, Providence permitting, with the Occoquan Church at their meeting place at Oak Grove, Monday after the third Sunday in August. Listen close now. To consider the propriety of, and if they deem proper, to proceed with the organization of an association. That's what always blew my mind about this. That Elder Smoot saw what associationalism had done. First thing he did was form another association. I'm going to say it so he could be moderator. I hope I'm wrong in imputing that motive to him, but I don't think I am. You remember, I think I mentioned this when we started. I asked Brother Barry. He'd sent me the book and I'd read it several more times, read at least twice more. I said, Brother Barry, what do you think about Elder Smoot's position, what he did, etc.? And he looked at me like he was wont to do. He said, well, Brother Lackey, Elder Smoot's doctrine was correct, but he was wrong in dividing like he did. And on mature reflection, I agree with him. Certainly, Elder Smoot held the correct doctrine. And if you want to, we'll look a little deeper into that next Friday. Because there's some wild things going on. But he was wrong to divide like he did, and he was. There was no reason to divide like he did. Why do you say that? Because if he would have persisted in the course, he wouldn't have had to withdraw. They'd have kicked him out. And he would have been a much more sympathetic figure than what he was. I told y'all when we started, it was 45 years after his death, they still talking nasty about him. Still talking bad, people were in that area, particularly around Quantico. Yes, there was a community called Quantico where, Quantico for the CIA, Quantico Marine Base, and all that stuff. A little country community. And at a little crossroads, there was the Quantico Meeting House of the Old School Baptist. It had fallen to the ground when I was there. The tin roof was on the ground. The little cemetery around it was unkept. Across the road, which I think went on to the Marine base somehow, there was the highway. There was a crossroad. And the old meeting house sat here in this growed up area, in the cemetery, butted up just about to the road, the crossroad. And then across that crossroad was a real neatly kept cemetery. I don't know whether it had originally been a part of that Quantico Church cemetery or not. I don't believe it was. Church at Occoquan, the church at Quantico, and the church at Frying Pan's going to divide over the issue. The majority will keep the meeting house and go with the White Party, as it was called then. The minority would meet in the home of Philip Cockrell, also in that area, right near the Frying Pan Meeting House. If y'all ever in Chantilly, go to Frying Pan Park and you'll see the meeting house. If somebody's around, they might even let you in, look in the inside. I'm trying to think whether it's a park employee or a Potomac Edison fella let me in. The only reason I say that is because he was working on the electricity and he let me in. I happened to be there when he was there. And I went in with him, and he stayed a little longer than he probably intended to because I was looking around the old house. Questions, comments, anything you got to say it now, please. I gotta go fix lunch. I mean, I'm hungry. Oh, goodness gracious. In case anybody's interested, I'm going to have me some Braunschweiger, some Colby cheese, and a salad. Oh, goodness gracious. Associations are political animals. And though at one time they had a use among the Baptists, at least somewhat, their day had passed, even in Elder Smoot's time. I just find it strange that Elder Smoot and those of his affiliation throughout the United States, the first thing they did is they made some kind of association. Either they said they were the original association, like in the case of the division of the Cons Creek in Indiana. There you go. If anybody can find it, Jesse G. Jackson, a defense of Providence Church. It's at least a 20-page pamphlet. I've never seen a copy, and I'd love to. Defense of Providence Church by Elder J. G. Jackson, Jesse G. Jackson. No relation to the one y'all thinking of. All right. I'm going to get off here if you got no questions or comments. Next week we'll look at some of the doctrinal controversies that went before this division, other than the Juniata Association. The Juniata Association was the reason given, but there was a lot more to it than that. And I mean a lot more. And we'll see, Lord willing. What happens when the Baptists start fighting? Let's bow together. Lord, look down upon us and grant us strength and life and peace through Jesus. Keep us in thy hand and be merciful unto us. Lord, we know we ain't nothing but rotten sinners as far as Adam is concerned. But we thank thee that in Christ we're made perfect and whole. Be with those that have a meeting to go to this weekend and make it a sweet one. Give them the blessed fellowship of the saints, that they can unite in the truth as it is in Jesus, and in the refreshing dew of thy doctrine, and in the sweet fellowship of the Holy Spirit. Those of us that don't, Lord, be with us as well. Enable us to be drawn out above this present time world and the things of sense, and keep us and give us a taste of thy presence and thy fellowship. Now go with us as we depart. Strengthen us through Christ and enable us to stand in him. For it's in his blessed name we ask. Amen. All right, brother. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention. I'd say thank you for your questions, but you didn't have any. Lord willing, we'll be seeing you later. Monday, I hope. If not before, you never know about me, do you? I might show up this weekend sometime. It's hard to say. But for now, adios.